How many Amerindian tribal cultures have been reduced to extinction? It's probably not a question that we can ever adequately answer, but if we take language as a stand-in, we can identify at least 80 within the borders of the US alone. And obviously only going back as far as the post-Columbian America, and only tribes that at one point had contact with Europeans. In all likelihood, each of these cultures had a plethora of songs, stories, ideas, and any number of other intangible cultural artifacts that died alongside them. Running with the idea of language setting the boundaries and parameters of thought, there will have been countless languages that have now been lost, and thus entire modes of thought that may have been lost with them. It's easy to see these cultural artifacts as being far more impactful than anything more tangible, like a descendant that one could create. Even wealth can be more long-lasting than one's own life, and perhaps even a lineage. But to prioritise such things ahead of one's own lineage is to rely on others who are close enough to yourself to uphold everything else that gives your non-biological achievements meaning and relevance. We would not write a book at the expense of some portion of our own existence and hand it over to a dog. The dog would have no use for it. Nor would we do so for an alien, sentient and even humanoid perhaps, but otherwise incapable of interpreting the book after we have passed. Another person, of a vastly different tribe, might have the capacity to interpret it, but find much less value in it, and may not even be interested. Even someone who could understand and interpret the text, but is of a different tribe and custom, will lose some of the context along the way. Only someone of the same custom can begin to extract intended meanings and depth from the book, and thus will find extra value in it, as some piece of the wider cultural whole. Take away the tribe, and a whole layer of context is immediately lost, and likely irrevocably so. Every trinket and tablet pulled out of the ground once had a purpose and meaning and a context among its creators. The difference between those that are meaningful now and those that are curiosities is who possesses them now, and whether the descendants of the people who created those items are still here to enrich them. Of course, many more such things rely entirely on the continuation of its people to exist at all, such as those lost languages, stories, and customs. So does that mean that such things are not transferable at all? Of course not. But as in the case of the Amerindians, those parts which are retained are often caricatures of their former selves, some extracted portion of a thing isolated from its interlocking parts and upheld as a symbol of some idea likely foreign to it. In essence, captured and paraded about, quite frequently. Therefore, even for the artist consumed in his work, it is his responsibility to ensure that he not neglect his much more stable genetic footprint for the sake of a more temperamental artistic footprint. So long as the same attitude can be portrayed in his offspring, the former will ensure the latter, and give greater meaning to it, within that context. For Tolkien's works are too enriched by his descendants that may at times fill in the blanks left in his works, and later commentary by having such a knowledge of the man. Meanwhile, we are surely at a loss for the lack of a descendant of Lovecraft to help us there with filling in the manifold holes in his work. So too, if the English were to perish, or even merely perish from the British Isles, much of Tolkien's work would be lost. Even if the texts remain complete, which itself is not guaranteed, the names alone conjure up immediate images of a way of life, tied to different parts of English history. And anyone hailing from the more quaint parts of the Shires can't help but see their own home in the Hobbit's Shire, where life is old, quiet, and warm. But likewise, I've no doubt that I would find it immeasurably difficult to attain the full context of something like a Romance of the Three Kingdoms, or other similar texts that exist in a context so far from my own. And although I could appreciate it, I would of course rank it far below many English authors, which someone of Chinese extraction would no doubt consider far inferior. But this is exactly why both peoples must continue on, and neither one of us forego our existence in the hopes that some other remote people values our cultural achievements as much as we do.